Okay, we have to take advantage of the fact that my heater's not going right now. Yay! I should not have scheduled this recording of lectures for January. It's too cold. So with health concerns, the things that the teens are concerned about are, being stressed out or being nervous about things. Their skin problems, their nose being too big, things like that. And then, acute infection. Oh no, I've got mono, or, I've got the flu, or I've got these kinds of acute things. What their parents are concerned about are whether their kid will contract an STI, right, a sexually transmitted infection. Will they use drugs? Will they become pregnant or make someone pregnant, right? So parents have like these big, dramatic, like life-altering concerns, and the teens feel like these are life-altering concerns, but they have got much, more acute things that they're worried about, things that are probably... Now, the stress and nervousness can set a pattern for the rest of your life, right? Skin problems, if you pick at it and stuff like that, you could definitely end up with scars for the rest of your life. If you feel super inhibited because you feel like your nose is too big or your teeth aren't straight enough, or these cosmetic issues, could certainly set up psychological attitudes and feelings about ourselves, right? Acute infections can be mild or they can be deadly. I mean, the teens, I'm not trying to belittle what the teens are concerned about. It's really clear that the teens are concerned about things that the parents are like, those are small. This is the stuff I'm worried about. So parents are definitely not on the same page as far as like what might be harmful to their kids. That's for sure. One of the things I think we should all be concerned about with adolescents is their nutrition. We've talked in childhood about how parents oftentimes are really concerned that their kids are not getting enough nutrition, and so they oftentimes will overfeed their kids. During puberty, with the growth spurt that's occurring, everybody's caloric intake needs to increase. In fact, this is the one time when you do actually need to eat more. Boys, on average, need to eat about 2,800 calories per day to fuel their growth, as well as their active lifestyles. In adolescence, we tend to see that this is our best, most likely time that people will be engaging in sports or dance or other things that are moving their bodies every day. And really, this is probably their highest rate of participation in physical activity. So between growing and then, being physically active, most boys on average need about 2,800 calories per day. Most girls need about 2,200 calories per day. And just to put that in perspective, they say the average adult male needs about 2,500 calories and the adult female needs maybe 2,000, 1,800, depending on your size. So this is a time when you actually need more healthy calories. It's also a time when obesity starts to manifest itself. Like today in the US, we're seeing more and more young children, early childhood and middle childhood children being defined as obese. But adolescence is usually the time when it really starts to manifest itself. It's defined as a skin fold measurement that's in the 85th percentile. And one of the big debates in research on obesity is whether the percentiles should be based on your current cohorts or should be based on previous norms. If everybody's getting heavier, then should we change the norms? Or should we stick to the old norms and say, okay, you guys are, like, all of you are overweight, right? Like, what should we do? And so that's a big debate. The definition, if I flip it the other way, if you have a skin fold measurement in the 85th percentile, that would mean that about 15% of teens would be defined as obese, because that's the 15% that are above the 85th percentile. One thing we do know about obesity is that overweight in your teen years is associated with poorer health in your adult years, even if the weight is lost. So there's a strong motive, and we talked about this in childhood, there's a strong motive to try and prevent overweight rather than remediate overweight. So parents who have been overfeeding their children or feeding their children the wrong types of caloric balance, so their child is still hungry even after having consumed plenty of calories, it's really in our best interest to be feeding our kids as nutritious food as we possibly can. And a lot of people say, well, that's really expensive. There's a lot of nutritious food to be had in canned food, in frozen food. You don't have to be at the fresh farmer's market paying 5 times as much for this same caloric balance as you could get in canned food. I was raised as child of the 70s, we didn't have fresh fruit and vegetables all year. I lived in California where you would think you'd have it, but when it got cold, all the stuff, sorry, we're not making any more right now. We didn't have this worldwide supply chain where all the fruits and vegetables could just come from someplace where it's warm right now. And so we got our spinach out of a can, right? We got our corn out of a can. And, a lot of us have very bad memories of it because all that stuff, like it's already been in the can and then your mom cooks it for too long and now she's serving you like some kind of gray thing. But if you, instead of cooking it like, after the fact, just heat it, canned food is not nutritionally different from fresh. In fact, in a lot of cases, it's better than fresh because it was picked at the peak of freshness, it was processed at the peak of freshness, and now it's in a can or it's frozen. So a lot of times people talk about food deserts and other kinds of things. There was this, in 2019, there was this big article that came out about how, too many dollar stores and Dollar Generals were popping up in small towns and kind of pushing out grocery stores and things like that. And the people who live in the small town and don't have access to like driving 20 miles to go to this big store or something were left with nothing nutritious to eat. And the Dollar General person was like, have you been to our frozen food section? Look at this. I've got all this frozen food in here. All of it is nutritious. You can eat from the frozen food section. And, that's the thing I would like to point out. A lot of times we talk about, nutrition and we can't afford it. But if you look at other options besides it has to be out of the produce section, or I'll just get McDonald's, which has gotten too expensive now too. It used to be really inexpensive, but it's go to the frozen food section, go to the canned food section. Eating disorders start to rear their heads in adolescence usually. That's usually that cutoff point where if anorexia is going to develop, it tends to develop in adolescence. The symptoms are that the usually girl, but we are seeing more and more boys who are displaying this, are striving to maintain a weight that is at least 20% below their ideal weight. So they use like excessive diet as one method or excessive exercise. One thing that most anorexics share in common is that they are preoccupied with food. A lot of times people mistakenly believe that an anorexic person doesn't care about food. They're preoccupied with it. In fact, they may say, hey, let me make you something to eat. And then they go, oh no, I ate some while I was cooking it, to kind of distract from the fact that they aren't eating it. But they like to be involved in food. They like the smell of food. They like to like manipulate the food. They like that. They just don't want to consume enough food. A lot of times the reason why they don't want to consume it is because they've got a distorted view of their own body. Here's a depiction of what it might look like to the anorexic girl on the left, who everybody else can see is underweight. But when she looks at herself, she thinks she looks like the girl on the right, who is normal weight. Like the anorexic person has an incorrect impression of what the bumps and bulges on their body mean. Okay, those are intestines, that's not fat, right? Like they don't process it correctly. And so they have this distorted view. We don't know what causes anorexia, but one thing that we think is media. The last time there were anorexia cases at the rate that they are today was back in the 1920s, when women were first encouraged to take off their corsets and wear these flapper dresses that were straight up and down. They were showing their arms for the first time. Like previously, women wore long sleeves, maybe 3/4 length sleeves, but absolutely did not wear short tank top style sleeves or like the spaghetti straps that were really popular in the 1920s. They didn't wear stuff like that. And so now all of a sudden they're supposed to fit in the clothing that they fit into when they had a corset to support them, but do it without the corset support. So they're supposed to still be the same size and they're supposed to show more of their skin. And this was what the media was telling them. Suddenly we had movies. There had always been women's magazines and things like that, but now the women's magazines were showing them something different. And of course, today we have all sorts of media influences that can really cause a distortion of what is desirable, what's achievable, what's healthy. We've actually got a new type of anorexia that's called orthorexia. Orthorexia. And that's where the person has just become completely obsessed with every single morsel that they put in their mouth, because they're trying to be so healthy. Like, I only want healthy things and that's all I'm going to eat. And so they obsessively read labels, or they obsessively only can eat what has been made from purely like, unprocessed foods, and I know exactly what went into it, and if I can't get what I'm going to have, I'm just not going to eat. Or they don't fuel their bodies. They're trying to be super virtuous through their eating, to the point where they're actually harming their bodies. So those are some really common new things on the forefront. I thought it might be helpful to see the Seattle Children's piece on society's influence on eating disorders. So I will see you on the other side of this video.